So I'm not going to lie, it seems a little trivial to be doing a video today, given everything that is happening in the world. I have not posted a video about the events because, to be quite frank, every time I go to write or say something, it sounds glib, because I don't think I could ever really, I can empathise, but I don't think I could ever really understand how people feel in that situation, and therefore I do not feel qualified to comment on it, other than to say that there have been some things that I have learned in the last week or so that have truly shocked me, and that I was completely ignorant of myself, in terms of the concerns that black people have in terms of living their daily lives and the encounters that they may have either with law enforcement or otherwise. So I don't think that there's anything that I can say, to be honest, other than to say that it's appalling, it shouldn't happen, and we shouldn't be allowing it to happen, and we definitely shouldn't be silent about it anymore. And I fully support the movement. And though I'm in Australia, and I've been reposting things that I think are useful posts on Instagram in terms of where to go to get more information and how to help. A lot of those sites I have looked at and are actually mostly US centric, and actually I have attempted to donate on a couple of them, and my donation has been denied because of my location. I just cannot stomach the idea that people either don't feel that they need to be educated on this stuff, or that they don't think it needs to be acknowledged, because it does. So, with all of that said, I will do as much as I can to support this Black Lives Matter movement, because I do fully support it. But again, I feel, even now, having this conversation, it just, without real action, I can sit here and say things, and I hope that what I say encourages people to really think about it and to really attempt to understand. But I also acknowledge that me saying these things can seem trivial, and it certainly feels trivial to me. Not trivial. It's definitely sincere, but as someone who has never had to fear for my life, I hate to think that that's what humans or any animal has to deal with on a daily basis, really. So I will continue to educate myself and talk to my black friends and my white friends and all of my friends of colour, and I will listen. And if that small thing can make a difference to someone and how they're feeling, then I think that's a pretty good outcome. So I'm going to go get a cup of tea, and I will come back and film a video about perfume, because ultimately that is what most of you come here for. All right, hi. I'm a little bit unprepared today. Surprise, surprise. I just had a wonderful morning. I caught up with my friend Joanna, who I met on Instagram, and we exchanged some samples and did some perfume sniffing, and it was just really, really good fun. I also met another fellow yesterday, Cosro, also from Brisbane, and he also heads up a Facebook group for fragrance heads in Brisbane. I think it's called Brisbane Fragrance. So if you're in Brisbane and you're trying to find like-minded people, then definitely go check out that page. I think we are also planning to do a bit of a catch-up in a couple of weeks, or maybe next week, to do some perfume sniffing amongst the whole group. So that should be really good fun. So today I am talking about a Maison Francis Kurkdjian fragrance. It is called Beau, and I have a feeling that this isn't going to show up very well because the print is in gold. So pardon me if it doesn't work. This was a sample I got when I purchased a bottle from the Maison Francis Kurkdjian website last year, I think, or might have been the year before. If you didn't know already, when you buy a bottle, you can select some samples. I think you can get up to 4 samples free with any purchase on their website. And this was one of the ones, because I'd never heard of this one before, so I decided to order this one. So this one is interesting. So I've sprayed it on this hand. When I first spray this on my skin, it's a very pretty floral fragrance, and I got the impression that it was a very youthful fragrance. But there was also something sharp in there, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it when I first sprayed it. Bearing in mind, my first experience of this fragrance was probably about 1.5 years ago, or maybe a year ago. I can't quite remember. Time is just inconsequential now, I think. So yeah, when I first spray it on, I get florals. I think mostly white florals, and I think some ylang in there as well. There's a little hint of a sharpness there, and a little bit more depth. So I kind of thought maybe it's a ylang ylang. But then after about 15 minutes or so, I get a very distinct urine note in there. So there is definitely an animalic note in this fragrance, which, in itself opens up, the fragrance itself opens up beautifully fresh and floral and youthful and innocent. And then you get this animalic note just creeping in there. And I don't know, it seems to clash a little bit with the fragrance as a whole. So when I first experienced this animalic note, and I'm guessing it's maybe civet because it smells a little bit urine-y, I thought I'll keep an open mind. And at first I was thinking, it kind of gives it a bit of a vintagey vibe. So it makes the fragrance, open, very youthful, but then develops into, I guess, a more mature style of fragrance. And it does smell I wouldn't go so far as to say that it does smell vintage, but it's on the cusp of smelling vintage. And I feel like it pulls it out of that, too young category for, women of my age or anyone sort of, 35 onwards who might consider it to be, or at least what the opening smells like, to be too young. However, that animalic note on my skin, at least, seems to get more and more prominent over time for probably the next couple of hours. Eventually it does dry down a little bit, or die down a little bit, but I think I do. There is a point at which I kind of struggle with this, and if I was doing a full wear of only this fragrance, I think I would be a little bit self-conscious of how it smells. And then as that animalic note starts to die down after a few hours, I get more of a musky tuberose scent coming through. with a hint of woods in there, but not a heavy wood. It's a very delicate wood, so maybe something like cedar, which I just sort of get a whiff of every now and then. It's not something that I find I can smell all of the time. For the most part in the dry down, I feel like it's a musky white floral. So overall, my experience of this scent is that I like the opening, even though I find it quite youthful, but I don't mind that so much. I quite like, sometimes you just want to wear something young. But what I will say is it did keep me lifting my hand to my nose regularly every time I wear this scent. I'm constantly sniffing it, but I can't decide if I'm doing that because I just love it or if I'm confused. My brain just can't seem to put the opening and the mid together. They seem to clash. There is a point in time when I'm wearing this fragrance that in that transition where the notes seem to clash a little bit, and I think my brain just can't reconcile them for some reason. And I think it's because of that animalic note that is making the fragrance go from a very youthful, whimsical young fragrance to a more mature, almost vintage style of fragrance. But I don't know, it's almost like that animalic note doesn't belong in this fragrance. And or that maybe it's just not blended as seamlessly as it is in other fragrances. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe that is the journey of this fragrance, going from being youthful to more mature. In a way, it's kind of like an angsty teenager in the middle there. Or maybe it feels like it doesn't belong there because on my skin, some of these animalic notes seem to amp up more than what might otherwise be intended. So I have this problem with a lot of fragrances, whether it's got cumin in it or whether it's oud, and sometimes civet, where those animalic nuances really amp up on my skin, but then on other people they smell amazing and it doesn't amp up at all. So perhaps that's what's happening here and it's non-intentional. And because of that, I also don't know if it is actually a separate note like civet that's causing this, or if it's actually the animalic nuance of those florals that are in the fragrance that is just amping up and making it seem like there is a separate animalic note in there, when in fact it's just perhaps the more indolic end of those florals. I mean, certainly there is no civet noted on the website or on Fragrantica as being a note in here. There is ylang ylang, there is jasmine, and there is tuberose, and there is orange blossom, all of which, under certain circumstances, can get a little bit skanky, depending on, I guess, the raw materials used and how they're blended. In the deep dry down, I don't find this fragrance to be particularly exciting. It is pretty, it's beautiful, but it just smells like a lot of other white floral fragrances on the market, really. And it's musky white floral and it's pretty, but I wouldn't necessarily say it makes one stand out. It also becomes quite weak at around the 4-hour mark for me, and reduces down to a skin scent. So it either needs topping up or I need to lift my arm to my nose in order to be able to smell it at that point. Overall, I mean, I like the fragrance, I like the opening. And as I said, it's very youthful and whimsical. So sometimes that's just how you want to smell, particularly in springtime, coming into summer. I kind of imagine myself wearing this on a spring, summer day with a floral dress and a straw hat and maybe some sandals and walking around in a meadow somewhere with a daisy in my hand. I never do that, by the way. The mid-dry down is where it becomes difficult for me, and I think when I'm wearing it as a sample and I've just spritzed it on my arm or on my hand, I can kind of convince myself that I don't mind it. But if I really think about it, I think that if I was to do a full wear of this on a regular basis, or if I had a full bottle and I was spritzing myself with it, I think that mid might bother me if I was doing a full wear. So yeah, overall, I'm not sure if I would buy a full bottle of this, as much as I like the opening. If I could get my hands on a partial bottle or a decant, I might be willing to give it more of a go. But at this point in time, I think you can only buy this fragrance directly from the MFK website in a full-size bottle. They don't even have the 35ml bottles available for this particular fragrance. Overall, with the exchange rate plus shipping, for me, it'll probably put it over the $250 mark. And I feel like there are other fragrances. If I was to buy another bottle now, there are other fragrances that I think would be more of a priority on my wish list than this one. So overall, if you like MFK fragrances and you like white florals, then this might be worth trying to get your nose on. And particularly if the urine note or those animalic notes don't amp up on your skin, then maybe it would wear better for you. But I would probably also wager that there are other white floral fragrances on the market at a lower price point that would probably do just as well to satisfy that need that you would have to wear this fragrance. So that is my very brief, not very well thought through impressions of Le Beau by MFK. It's a shame, but can't love everything, I guess. And it's probably just as well we don't. Otherwise, I would be extremely in debt about now. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope that you had some more insight on Le Beau, or if you were curious about it or learned about a new fragrance that, well, it's not that new, but learned about a fragrance that you hadn't heard about before. Tomorrow morning, I will be joining Pep from the Sentinel on his channel for a live stream at about 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. We also have Eve Spider's Smells joining us as well, and we will be talking about our perfume pet peeves. So that should be interesting. So I hope you're all staying safe, and I look forward to talking to you all again next week. All right, bye.